Week 1 of the NFL preseason is officially over, and I want to spend today's video talking about division winners and who should take the crown for every single one this season. Now, a lot can happen in one NFL season. You look even back to last year with the Houston Texans. Almost nobody picked them. I don't even know if anybody did. And they shockingly, with a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach, went on to win the AFC South. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are another team. Everybody ruled them out after Tom Brady retired. They signed Baker Mayfield to be the heir apparent of him. And once again, a team that many people saw, even me included, as one of the potentially worst teams in the league, went on to win their division and also a playoff game. So in this video, I'm attempting to find that one or two sneaky teams that will shock the NFL world by winning their division title. Now, there are some obvious ones. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are a perfect example of this. They have won 8 straight AFC West titles, and I do not see it stopping in 2024. I am interested to see Jim Harbaugh and the Los Angeles Chargers. Wherever Harbaugh is gone, he's rebuilt either that program or a team with like the 49ers into a powerhouse, and I think he can do the same with the Chargers, but it's going to take some time. I don't think this year that they're ready. They're still lacking a lot of talent on the offensive side of the ball. They still have some holes on defense as well. It's an entirely new coaching staff. Justin Herbert has his foot injury. He should be ready for week 1, but still he's missing the entire offseason program pretty much. And he's not going to be throwing to the guys he has been for several years now in Mike Williams or Keenan Allen. It's an entirely new wide receiver core. So I do think him missing training camp is a bigger deal than maybe many will want to admit. The Broncos and the Raiders are interesting in their own right. The Broncos got rid of Russell Wilson and his $50+ million contract. Bo Nix, their rookie quarterback, I do expect him to start week number 1. But again, they got rid of so many players this offseason. They didn't really have a lot of cap space to improve their roster because of the dead money of Russell Wilson. They lost Jerry Jeudy. They lost Justin Simmons. Those were two of the better players on their entire roster last year. And I don't think in one offseason when they lose a bunch of players and a veteran quarterback who at least was, a league average starter, to then acquiring a rookie quarterback and magically winning more than 8 games. I just don't think that's very realistic. And the Raiders, they have roster talent all over the place. Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, they added Christian Wilkins, but they don't have an answer at the quarterback position. It's Aiden O'Connell and it's Gardner Minshew. Antonio Pierce said that he will announce who the starter is, I think sometime next week. Honestly, I have no clue who to expect it to be. I feel like it's going to be Aiden O'Connell just because he's the younger guy and he does want to see what he has in a former draft pick before handing the reins over to a longtime veteran quarterback. But I just can't view the Raiders as a serious playoff contender or even a team to challenge the Chiefs, although they did beat them, last Christmas in one of those crazy games. But I just can't see the Raiders as a real threat in the AFC when they have this quarterback dynamic that they do currently. So as long as Patrick Mahomes is upright and plays the majority of the games for the Chiefs next year, I think they are going to cruise to another division title. I think the other West division in the NFC West is another division I feel pretty confident in saying that the San Francisco 49ers will take it home again. I'm not as confident because of all the offseason drama they have had. Christian McCaffrey just suffered an injury. He's going to miss a couple of weeks. The Brandon Ayuk trade situation, the Trent Williams situation. There's just a lot going on, and anytime a team has a lot of drama circulating around them prior to a start of a season, it usually does not end well. But the 49ers, they still just have one of the best overall rosters in the league. They have one of the best head coaches in the league. And when you look at the rest of their division and the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals, I still feel like they have a very big advantage in terms of just their roster talent. I'll start with the Cardinals first. Some people actually consider them as maybe a sneaky playoff team this year if Kyler Murray can stay healthy and develop a nice connection with Marvin Harrison Jr. And I don't totally discredit that, but to win this division, they're probably going to have to win 11 or 12 games. I just don't see them being that good, but I do think they could be a team that's hovering around the 8-9 win mark, can take off some contending teams on any given week just because of the talent of Kyler Murray. And the Seattle Seahawks have a little bit of that just because of all the offensive talent that they have. But again, going back to what I said about the Raiders, I'm not a huge believer in Geno Smith. He's already been dealing with a ton of injuries as well in training camp. And they also have a rookie head coach in Mike McDonald and a rookie offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb. He's never coached at the NFL level. So I do think there's going to be some growing pains there, and they've just been getting destroyed by the 49ers year in and year out. I don't really think that's going to change. The one wild card could be the Los Angeles Rams. I have seen some people pick them to actually upset the 49ers and win this division. You've got a veteran quarterback and one of the best in the league in Matthew Stafford, one of the best offensive minds in the league in Sean McVay, a fairly nice collection of weapons in Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Kyron Williams in the backfield. They drafted Blake Corum in the draft. The defense is still fairly young, but they drafted 2 new players on the defensive line this past year in the draft, but they did lose Raheem Morris to the Atlanta Falcons as their defensive coordinator, so that's going to be another big hole to fill. If all this offseason drama does affect the 49ers and Matthew Stafford continues to just stay healthy and ball out, this could be a very close race atop of the division. But just because of the pedigree and also just because of the overall roster talent, I'm still saying it's a pretty obvious choice to pick the 49ers. But that's really it for the obvious picks in the division, in my opinion at least. But I'll start with the AFC East now. The Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Jets, and the New England Patriots. The Bills have won this division each of the last 4 years, and they still have the two most important pieces of their franchise, their head coach in Sean McDermott and their quarterback in Josh Allen. However, you could argue that last season was the worst of, I guess, the contending Bills with Josh Allen. Through the midseason point, they were 6-6 before winning 5 straight games and defeating the Miami Dolphins in Week 18 on Sunday Night Football to clinch the East. It's been well documented, all the veterans that they lost: Stephon Diggs, Mitch Morse, their center, Gabe Davis also left, Tre'Davious White, both of their starting safeties. There was a lot of turnover in Buffalo this offseason. They're going younger, they're going cheaper, and while that could be better for the Bills long term and give them a few more years of this Josh Allen window to really build around them, I do think in 2024, this does have a chance to impact how good this team can be. And the team that finished second place last year and the Miami Dolphins are another very fascinating team. They really spent their offseason locking up their core, signing Tua Tagovailoa to a massive contract extension, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and most of their acquisitions were older veteran players like Calais Campbell, Jordan Poyer from the Buffalo Bills, even Kendall Fuller. They also have a new defensive coordinator. Anthony Weaver is going to be taking over for Vic Fangio, who left to coach the Philadelphia Eagles. They also lost Christian Wilkins. As I mentioned earlier, he went to the Raiders. The Dolphins kind of have a lot of moving parts as well, but again, they're still going to be bringing back majority of their high-end players, Jalen Ramsey on defense. But at this point with the Dolphins, I'm not going to pick them until they can prove that they can show up in December in the cold and against really good teams. The New England Patriots, I think, have no chance in this race whatsoever. They're going to be starting Jacoby Brissett or Drake May majority of the season this year. Rookie head coach into Rod Mayo, who does not have a ton of coaching experience. I like some of the roster talent on defense. They do have a couple of nice young playmakers who they drafted this year on offense. But I mean, you compare their coaching staff and their roster talent to the other foes in the division, and it's easily last. And now the New York Jets. They are one of these quote-unquote mystery teams I do think could theoretically make some noise this year. Obviously, there's a big caveat with the Jets because they do have a lot of quote-unquote injury-prone players. I think Aaron Rodgers can fall in that umbrella now after coming off of an Achilles injury at the age of 40. Tyron Smith, who they signed from the Dallas Cowboys at left tackle, hasn't played, I think, over like 13 games in the last 5 years. Mike Williams is their wide receiver too. He's always banged up. So if the injury bug strikes them, and it very well could in MetLife Stadium, the Jets could find themselves again with 8 or 9 wins and maybe in that playoff mix. But if this Jets team can stay relatively healthy, I do think they're going to be my pick for the AFC East. Sounds a little bit crazy, but the Jets have proven to me that they can beat the Buffalo Bills. They have done it each of the last 2 seasons without really even having a legit quarterback. I mean, Zach Wilson has done it. All their key players on defense are going to be back, and they play really well against the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. And I expect the offense with Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and the rebuild offensive line to be just good enough to win this team maybe 11 games. And I think that could be enough to win the AFC East with the Dolphins, Bills, and Jets all kind of battling it out for the top of the division. Now to the NFC East, I view this division as a 2-team race, as it has been for the last several years, in the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. This is probably one of the best divisions that I pick because if you just look at the history, there has been no repeat winner in this division since 2004. It's been the Cowboys and the Eagles for the last handful of years, just alternating who wins it, and this year it falls on the Eagles. I don't see the Giants as a real threat with Daniel Jones. They could be a fairly fun team. They got a pass rusher and Brian Burns. They got Malik Neighbors in the draft, who I think is going to be really, really good. But in the grand scheme of things, again, comparing the talent levels to the Eagles or the Cowboys, I still just don't think the Giants stack up, especially when they're going to have maybe the 4th best quarterback in the division. And that brings me to the Washington Commanders, who some people are already labeling as, hey, maybe they're going to be the Houston Texans and the CJ Stroud of last season. A new culture is brought in, a ton of new players, and then they get themselves a really nice rookie quarterback and things take off. I pushed back on that a little bit. I feel like the Texans had a little bit more talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They hit on Tank Dell. They had Nico Collins. The offensive line was really, really solid. I think the Commanders will be a lot better than they were last year because I think Dan Quinn can at least make that defense serviceable. It was like one of the worst in the league last year. I like Brian Robinson in the backfield. I like Terry McLaurin. But the offensive line is still not super good. I think Jaden Daniels could be running for his life. I mean, we saw last year with Sam Howell. He took so many big hits and so many sacks. Obviously, some of those are attributed to him and his just lack of pocket presence or mobility. Jaden Daniels has a lot more of that to his game. But at the end of the day, a bad offensive line is a bad offensive line, and I do think the Commanders still have one of the worst ones in the league. I could see them potentially in the mix and fighting for a wild card if Jaden Daniels is as good as some people believe that he will be. But in terms of competing with the Eagles or the Cowboys for the top spot, I just can't see that in year number one of this new regime. The Cowboys, they're well documented all across social media. They didn't really add a ton of players this offseason. They have more drama as well, not paying CeeDee Lamb, not paying Dak Prescott, not even paying Micah Parsons yet. They brought back Mike McCarthy. He has 1 year left on his deal. This is the big season for the Cowboys. If things go wrong, could this be Dak Prescott's and Mike McCarthy's last year? I think that could potentially be on the table if they maybe miss the playoffs. They've won 12 games 3 years in a row. I think they're going to win maybe 10 or 11, take a slight step back. But as I mentioned, no repeat winner since 2004. I think the Philadelphia Eagles, with all the moves they made, getting Saquon Barkley, revamping their entire secondary, getting Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator, getting Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator, I think they're going to be back to being really good this year, probably win 12 games. So I'm cementing my pick for the Philadelphia Eagles to reclaim top of the NFC East. These last 4 divisions, though, are very, very tough. And let's start off with the AFC North. Always one of the most competitive divisions in the league year in and year out. No matter who's the starting quarterback, no matter who's the head coach, all these teams play against each other very, very well. Last year, I think it just came down to the Ravens being the most fortunate in terms of just health. The Browns lost a ton of players. They lost their starting quarterback in Deshaun Watson. The Bengals lost Joe Burrow. And for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson played every single game. And I think that was a big reason why they did take home the division. I think the Steelers are going to be what they are every single year, around the 9-win mark. Maybe this is finally the year Mike Tomlin has a losing season, or maybe this is the year they finally get a little bit of stability at the quarterback position and take off and win the division. The Browns are a very talented roster, have so many star players across the team. But again, a major question mark at quarterback. Is Deshaun Watson even remotely close to the same player he used to be? Is he going to be able to stay healthy? He's been hurt a lot since he's came back. I think they're too risky to pick as well. So I'm between the Baltimore Ravens and I'm between the Cincinnati Bengals. And if Joe Burrow is going to stay healthy, I think the Bengals are my pick. The Ravens, they lost a lot of players in free agency. They lost their defensive coordinator and Mike McDonald. The Bengals are bringing back their coaching staff. They're bringing back every major player, even T. Higgins on his franchise tag. They did get rid of Joe Mixon, but I think his best years were already a little bit behind him last year, and they already have a nice stable of backs to replace him. For me, it just comes down to, can Joe Burrow stay healthy for the entirety of the season? If he can, and the Bengals again try to address their offensive line, getting Trent Brown, drafting Amarius Mims in the draft, if they can keep him upright, I do think the Bengals will be a major contender again, and maybe end up being the team that has the best shot to take down the Kansas City Chiefs from winning 3 straight Super Bowls. And the other North is going to be an absolute bloodbath this year. The Packers, the Lions, the Bears, and even the Vikings. I think the Vikings are going to be the worst team in this division just because of the instability at the quarterback position, but they would probably not be the worst team in many other divisions across the league. They still have so many star players on offense: Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, even Aaron Jones. Their offensive line is really, really good. Their coaching staff is really good. Brian Flores, one of the best defensive coordinators in the league. Kevin O'Connell, one of the best offensive minds in the league. Their defense, they have some pieces there as well. But Sam Darnold as your starting quarterback, or JJ McCarthy, who's only 21 years old, is going to need some time to really develop. Picking that led team over Jordan Love or Jared Goff or Caleb Williams, I just can't really do that at this present moment. The Bears won 8 games last year, and I do think they could be around that again, but it could be a situation where their record is the same, but they look a lot better as a team. Offensively, I think it's going to be night and day. I mean, we saw Caleb Williams in his first ever preseason game. He was electric. With all the offensive talent that they have, they added Keenan Allen and Rome Odunze, DeAndre Swift in the backfield. I think the offense is going to be really, really good. And defensively last year, we saw the Bears defense really turn up down the stretch of the season once they got Montez Sweat. I think the Bears are going to be a really, really formidable team next year. But when you have the Packers and you had the Lions, the Packers were just a couple of plays away from making the NFC Championship game last year. And the Lions did make the NFC Championship game last year. I still think these are the top 2 teams in the division. They have the experience. They have veteran head coaches. They also have veteran quarterbacks. I think this could be a situation where one of these teams wins 12 games and the other one wins 11 games. It's going to be a very, very close race. But at the end of the day, I'm going to rock with the Lions. I know the Packers made a lot of moves this offseason, getting Josh Jacobs, Xavier McKinney in the secondary, having a very solid draft as well. But personally, I just love how the Lions have built this team in the past couple of years. Seems like every single offseason, they really attack and address the major holes on their team. And what do they do this offseason? They completely revamp their secondary. Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw Jr., first 2 picks in the draft. They trade for Carlton Davis. So their secondary should be a lot better. I think their defense is going to be much improved. And then their offense is still going to be so good. Ben Johnson is also returning as their offensive coordinator. Jared Goff is back. You get year 2 of Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. You still have Amon-Ra St. Brown, the offensive line, probably the best in the league. I mean, they're absolutely loaded. And Dan Campbell with his physical mindset, his physical mentality, the Lions might end up being the team I pick to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. So I'm very high on them, and I'm going to pick them to win the NFC North for their 2nd year in a row. And now the AFC South. This has become a very interesting division over the past couple of years. I mean, this was like the dumpster fire division for really kind of a long time. I mean, you had the Andrew Luck Colts, then the torch got passed to the Deshaun Watson Texans for a short stint, then it went to the Titans with Tannehill and Derrick Henry. But there really hasn't been like a couple of seasons where every single team is actually really respectable and they're just battling it out all season long. I think this year, though, is one of those years where we could see all 4 of these teams being pretty respectable. Obviously, the Texans, who won it last year, they're bringing back their entire team. They made some improvements as well. Getting Daniel Hunter in for agency from the Minnesota Vikings. He had a couple of sacks in his first preseason game. He's going to be alongside Will Anderson. That's going to be a fun pass rush duo. Offensively, we know about Stephon Diggs. He might be the wide receiver 3 for this team this year, just be like their little slot wide receiver. But if CJ Stroud is as good as he was last year, it's hard to pick against this Houston Texans team. Had one of the best rookie seasons for a quarterback in NFL history. If he improves on that season, the Texans could find themselves as one of the most dangerous teams in the league. The Jaguars were 8-3 last year before having a pretty big collapse, largely due to the injury of Trevor Lawrence. He suffered couple of them, a sprained ankle, then I think he hurt his knee as well. They made some additions as well in the offseason. Brian Thomas Jr. as their first round pick. Gabe Davis, they got him in free agency. On the defensive line, they got Eric Armstead. But I still have some questions about their secondary. They have a new defensive coordinator. Will their defense be improved this year? They have one of the best pass rushers in the league in Joshua Hines, I think is his name now. Trayvon Walker did improve last year. We'll see if he can take another step into becoming worthy of the first overall pick. But there's still just some questions that I have about this Jaguars team. How good is Trevor Lawrence? When is he finally going to show off that generational label that he had coming out of Clemson? If he can stay healthy and take a leap this year, cut down on the turnovers, hey, then maybe the Jaguars do have a chance to win this division. But similarly to the Miami Dolphins, I just want Trevor Lawrence to prove it to me at this point. So until he proves to me that he can become an elite quarterback, I'm just going to fade him in the Jags. And the Tennessee Titans, who were the 4th place team in this division last year, they have a new head coach this year, and Brian Callahan moved on from Mike Vrabel. Will Levis is entering year number 2. It does seem like he's having a fairly good camp so far. They made a number of additions as well, getting him some weapons. Calvin Ridley in free agency. Tony Pollard helping out the offensive line as well, getting some additions on defense to help out that unit. And it's really just on Will Levis' shoulders. If he can have a gigantic jump in year number 2, I don't think it's crazy to predict the Titans to take home this division. But the reason I'm not going to predict that is because I'm going to predict it with the Indianapolis Colts. I think Anthony Richardson is going to have that big year 2 leap and actually bring the Colts home the AFC South division title. They were one good swing pass from Gardner Minshew away from winning the division just this past year. I'm a really big believer in Shane Steichen as one of the best coaches in the entire league. We saw what he did with Jalen Hurts, and we saw how Jalen Hurts performed without him the very following year. I think he knows what he needs and wants in the quarterback position. That's why he went out and drafted Anthony Richardson in the draft. I think their defensive line has a chance to be one of the best in the league, adding to it again this offseason with Laitu Latu with their first round pick. Offensively, a very good offensive line. Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and even Adonai Mitchell, who they drafted in the second round. I like this Colts roster, and I think Anthony Richardson is really going to excel this year and break out. I mean, he has all the physical capabilities, a super strong arm, great athleticism, and he looked really, really impressive last year in his limited snaps before he got healthy. Again, that's the big thing with him. He does need to stay on the field, but if he can, I'm going to pick the Colts as my AFC South winner this year. And the last division we need to talk about is the NFC South, and this is universally seen as probably the weakest one in the entire league. As I mentioned in the intro, the Buccaneers won it last year, really surprising a lot of people with Baker Mayfield leading the team. And honestly, I don't think they're a bad pick to pick them again to win it. Their core is back once again. They didn't really make a ton of moves this offseason. I feel like the Bucs are kind of like one of those teams that I really haven't heard much about. Their offensive coordinator, though, did leave in Dave Canales, who's head coaching the Carolina Panthers now in the division. I will be interested to see how big his impact was on Baker Mayfield and that offense. Their new man in charge is Liam Cohen. I'm not going to pretend to act like I know a ton about him and his scheme and what he's going to run. I assume it'll be similar to what the Bucs did last year, just to try and keep the continuity. And Baker Mayfield looked pretty good in it, so I'm sure they want to keep everything roughly the same. So the Bucs once again could definitely win the division. Obviously, the huge favorite is the Atlanta Falcons after their offseason signing Kirk Cousins. I feel like most people believe that their talent on their roster is good enough. They just need a quarterback to facilitate it. And now that they got Kirk Cousins and, hey, even Michael Penix Jr. in the first round, that they're going to take off this year, that it's going to be an easy slam dunk that they take the division. But I'm honestly not too sure that's going to happen. I still think their defensive line and their pass rush is not going to be good. Their secondary, they have a couple good pieces, AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates, but there's still a couple of question marks there as well. Offensively, they should be fairly good. I like their wide receiver core. I do like Kyle Pitts. I think he'll have a breakout season this year. Running back with Bijan Robinson, but how is Kirk Cousins going to bounce back from this Achilles injury? Can he stay healthy? If not, how good will Michael Penix be as a rookie this year? I like some of the talent on this team, but I just don't think it's head and shoulders over the rest of the teams in the South, where I'm just like, yeah, the Falcons are a slam dunk. They're easily going to take home this division crown. I just don't see it like that. I don't think the Carolina Panthers have a chance, though, to go from the worst team in the league to being a division title winner. I did like their offseason, though, just surrounding Bryce Young. They sacrificed some pieces on defense like Brian Burns, Frankie Louvu. They really just go all in on offense to surround Bryce and see what they have. A couple of pieces on the offensive line like Robert Hunt, who they paid over $100 million to, trading for Deontay Johnson, trading up in the draft and spending a first-round pick on Xavier Legette. I think this year is really just about seeing some development out of Bryce Young and just hoping and crossing their fingers that he can be their quarterback of the future and that their trade with the Chicago Bears will not end up being the worst in all of sports history. I do think they'll be better this year, maybe around 5-6 wins. Won't be the laughing stock of the league. I think their offenses will definitely be serviceable, but with the pieces they lost on defense and still just needing some more development out of players on offense, I still think this year is going to be a developmental and transition year for the Panthers. And the last team in this division is the New Orleans Saints. And the Saints last year were pretty big favorites to win this division after they went out and got Derek Carr. Kind of very similar to what the Falcons did this offseason. I mean, many people thought, hey, the Saints have some good roster talent. They're going to add a stable quarterback. And their team's a slam dunk to make the playoffs. That ended up not happening. I think that could happen again with the Falcons. With the Saints this year, I think Derek Carr is on the hot seat. I think Dennis Allen is on the hot seat. If they do not make the playoffs, I do think both of them will be gone. The Saints are always one of those teams that don't have a ton of cap space because they just keep kicking the can down the road, restructuring their players' contracts, adding some void years to the new players they sign, and then just kind of a repeat cycle over and over. But I thought they had some solid additions, getting like Chase Young on the defensive line. I know they brought in Justin Simmons on a visit as well. He would be a very nice addition. And I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to pick the New Orleans Saints to win the division this year. I don't like putting my faith in Dennis Allen. I do not like putting my faith in Derek Carr, but they're favored to finish third in the division. I just think that the talent level between all of these teams is not as far as many people believe that it is. They brought in a new offensive coordinator as well. Maybe their offense should be a little bit less lethargic this year. And I think they'll win 9 or 10 games. Falcons and the Bucs not too far behind them. But give me the Saints to win the NFC South, and those are officially all of my NFL division winner predictions for the 2024 NFL season. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think about my predictions, and also what are some of your predictions for this upcoming season. But subscribe to the channel if you are new, drop a like on the video if you did enjoy it, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys in my next one.